Hello, and welcome to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation's webinar. I'm in the business of hope, how to keep believing when things feel impossible. My name is Heather Held, and I am the Director of Family Support here at the PBTF, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, there's just a few guidelines to review. You are muted for this webinar and your video is disabled, but we do welcome questions during and after the opening remarks, so please type those into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom window. We may not get to every question, but we will try to answer as many as possible. We are pleased to once again welcome Dr. Matt Zakreski for today's webinar. Dr. Matt is a high-energy, creative, clinical psychologist and professional speaker who utilizes an eclectic approach to meet the specific needs of his neurodivergent clients. He's proud to serve the gifted community as a consultant, a professor, an author, and a researcher, having spoken over 400 times all over the world. We are excited to welcome him back today again, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to everyone Dr. Matt.
And thank you for the lovely introduction, as always, Heather. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is a talk that is near and dear to my heart, and it's a particularly good one. So I'm going to go ahead and make this happen. Okay, there we go. That's weird. Let's try that again. Take two, action. All right, there we go. All right. So everybody can see this, I hope, and let's dive in. So yeah, I have to send Heather an updated bio. I went ahead and counted all the times I've spoken. I'm at combining in-person and webinars. I'm at over 950. So maybe by the end of this calendar, y'all have hit 1,000, which is ridiculous. And I'm a clinical psychologist, neurodiversity advocate, and as I like to say, grown-up gifted kid. And the reason I'm involved with the PBTF community is that I'm also a brain tumor survivor. I was diagnosed in 2001 with a subependymal giant cell astrocytoma, for those of you scoring at home. So this presentation will discuss suicide, despair, and suicide ideation. So as always, I try to lay a content warning out there. And if this becomes too hard for you, please take care of yourselves. You know, this is going to be recorded. These slides will be made available to you. You know, and there's a lot of good stuff in here, but you've got to be in a position mentally and emotionally to hold that stuff. So why do people go to therapy, right? And I'll leave it to probably one of my all-time favorite movies, The Princess Bride. Where were we? Oh, yes, in the pit of despair. And not only are things really freaking hard out there right now, just in general, right? I mean, the earth is dying and there's political upheaval and there are wars and diseases, and it's really intense and scary out there. And you take that world that is hard enough as it is, and then your kid, your heart who lives outside your body, gets diagnosed with a brain tumor, right? So yes, we are in the pit of despair. And one of the things that is most humbling about my job as a clinical psychologist is that I get to see people sometimes at their lowest, when they are in that pit of despair. And when they're in that pit, they're looking for lots of things. They're looking for guidance, they're looking for information, but mostly they're looking for hope. So what is hope? To have hope is to want an outcome that makes your life better in some way. And better can take a lot of different directions and means different things to different people. To expand on that a little bit, we have to have hope is to want an outcome that makes your life better in some way, and expanded on, the expectation that one will have positive experiences, or that a potentially threatening or negative situation will not materialize, or will ultimately result in a favorable state of affairs. Right. So while I am often hard on the American Psychological Association, they did nail the definition of hope in this one, because it's not just, I hope this good thing happens, but a lot of times it's, I hope this bad thing doesn't happen, or I hope that things don't get worse. And this second definition of hope is vital for the brain tumor community, because obviously we hope that we never get a brain tumor, and obviously we wish it didn't happen to us. But the hope that we find most tangible in these situations is the hope that this negative situation, things getting worse, never materializes, and ultimately our lives get back to normal. So that second definition of hope is particularly relevant for this community. So where does hope come from? It comes from your personal values and dreams, right? Hope looks different for every person, just like success looks different for every person. It comes from confidence in life, which is a thing that can be drastically shaken by a major diagnosis. And it's interesting because there is hope sort of coded into the human genome, right? As a species, we are not content to be content. We have always pushed the barriers, looked for new challenges, found new resources. There's something spectacularly human about about having hope, right? Because we always want things to get better. And one of the things that is interesting about our brains is our brains don't like not understanding things, right? They like to have knowledge and like to feel like they know what's going on. So in order to do that, our brains create narratives of our lives. And hope gives that a guiding principle. So we all have what the kids like to call main character energy. We're the main characters of our own lives. And hope gives us a structure to run that narrative around. And I can't think of a better example than Andy Dufresne from the classic film Shawshank Redemption. And he says, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. And if Andy Dufresne, who, if I can paraphrase the movie, had some of the toughest years there were in Shawshank, if Andy Dufresne can still have hope, then it shows us that how personal and how resilient the concept of hope is, right? And I think that it's really powerful to think about the hope as a guiding principle. Andy hoped, and I hope I'm not spoiling the movie for anybody, but it has been out for 30 years. So, rent it on Netflix. But Andy hoped he would get out of prison, and he hoped he would get to Zinwatanehu, and he hoped that Morgan Freeman could come and visit him. And all of those things come to pass, right? And that spark, that light in the darkness, was what kept him going when things were really bad in the prison. So sometimes we need to talk about the difference between hope and optimism. And this is going to sound pretty pedantic, but I'm a pretty pedantic person. So hope is linked to optimism, but they are not the same thing. Optimism is an attitude or outlook that good things will happen, that your wishes or aims will ultimately be fulfilled. I am optimistic I'm going to get this job. I'm optimistic I'll find a date to prom. I'm optimistic that I'll recover from this brain tumor I have. And the idea is that hope allows us to set and achieve the goals that create that optimistic future. We need to have hope and optimism to move forward, because the combination of them is really powerful. But like Eric Lewis says, and he's a researcher in this space, to be optimistic is to assume things will work out. To be hopeful is to realize that things can work out if you work at them. Hope requires responsibility and agency. Optimism relieves us of that. And as a psychologist, I'm always trying to put my clients' hands on the steering wheel for their own recovery, their own journey. And so that's why I prefer hope to optimism. Like optimism is like, gosh, I hope I'm not depressed. Hope is, I don't want to be depressed. I want a different life. And here are the steps I am willing to take to make that depression go away. So hope vis-a-vis autism, hope vis-a-vis optimism for the brain tumors community is particularly an important place because we're always going to have optimism that our doctors know what they're doing. What I want us all to do is be able to look at our kids and say, our hope plan for you is to do these things that are going to increase your chances of surviving this terrible thing by whatever percent we can. And that might mean taking your vitamins. It might mean eating your green vegetables. It might mean going to yoga. It might mean going to school for as long as you can, whatever those things are. But the tangible outcomes that come from the hope give us a plan to meaningfully impact our own lives. So hope then provides us with the goals to make our lives better and the motivation to meet them. And hope looks to the future and thus makes the present easier to bear. We're going to unpack that concept a lot as we go along, because right now, a lot of us are dealing with presents that are very difficult, if not impossible to bear. And hope connects us to a broader cosmic, or if you like the word spiritual, universe. Hope connects us to something bigger than ourselves. And when you are facing a mortal challenge, when you're facing a catastrophic threat to yourself, I mean, you bring in all the Avengers, right? And you bring in the sense of connected to some sort of broader spiritual power, whatever that looks like you. It could be faith in modern medicine. It can be faith in God. It can be faith in the stars and planets. You could go old school and say it's Zeus and Apollo, whatever works for you, but it connects us to something bigger than us. And there's this idea, right, that hope is sort of a dainty concept, that hope is like a lovely little fairy, like, la, 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 I have hope and things will be good and it's pretty and wonderful. And I'll tell you this, when I talk to people in marginalized communities or people who have been challenged or hurt or faced with some sort of catastrophic threat, like the brain tumor community does, I'm like, hope is not some dainty princess. Hope is like Rocky. I didn't hear no bell, right? It's the idea that no matter how bad things got, Rocky didn't hear no bell. The fight's not over, right? Hope is not a dainty princess. Hope spits out the teeth that got knocked out, pulls herself up and says, let's go for round two, right? How many of us have taken major hits on this journey? Hits to our mental health, our emotional health, our self-esteem, our trust in the system, and hope is not some soft thing. Hope is resilient. And I like this clip here because it reminds us that no matter what you guys have been through, and you've been through a lot, is that you gave up your own time to come to this webinar about hope because you are Rocky in this situation and your kids are like Rocky in this situation because you didn't hear no bell. And that matters. So we talk a lot about goal setting and how that's a fundamental piece of hope. So I like to talk about what makes a good goal. So what makes a good goal is we like to use the SMART acronym. A specific goal, a good goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Those are our 5 steps to make a good goal. So if your goal is to recover from having a brain tumor, then we want to set a specific goal. So the specific, like, what does recover mean? Does recover mean go back entirely to my life as it was? Does specific mean get the most out of my life I can, right? Define what that is. And maybe those concepts are too broad. They're not specific enough. I knew that when I was diagnosed with my brain tumor, This was in November of 2001. We had just about started auditions for the spring musical. And I knew that I would feel a lot better if I got to be in the spring musical for my senior year. So that was my specific goal. And setting a specific goal not only personalizes it, right, but it gives us something that our kids value and have some control over. Then we do that, we make the goal measurable, right? Earlier today, I was in a therapy session with one of my clients who's like, I want to lose weight. I'm like, cool. How much weight do you want to lose? He's like, I want to be skinny. Cool. How much weight do you want to lose? He's like, why do you keep asking me? I said, because less weight and skinny are not definable terms. They're not measurable, right? Your brain can keep moving the goalposts in that direction. If you want to lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 100 pounds, whatever that is, but have a number, make it measurable, achievable. And this is something where we're going to have realistic and challenging conversations. An achievable goal can be really high. I want you to set the highest possible goals, but it's really important that they're achievable, right? I love basketball and I play at the YMCA all the time, but I'm never going to dunk a basketball, guys. I'm 6 foot, 215 pounds. That is just not going to be on the journey for me, right? But I can set an achievable goal to get better at basketball, to make more 3-pointers, to get better at defense. Those are things that if they become measurable, they become achievable, right? But if your kid's goal is to recover from their brain tumor and gain the ability to fly or shoot lasers out of their eyes, well, that would make a great Marvel comic, but it's not so much going to be a part of our recovery journey. Then relevant. A relevant goal is another way that we meet our kids where they are. Because as adults, we are cursed and blessed with the 3,000-foot view. We're thinking about college. We're thinking about walking them down the aisle at their wedding. We're thinking about the life they could have in the future. And those things all matter to our kids, but they may not be relevant, right? Going back to being in the spring musical, I guarantee you my mom wouldn't have put that on her radar as a list for me, as a goal for me. But she wanted me to be healthy and learn how to talk and walk and and have full use of my body again. And those are all great. I cared like any red-blooded American 18-year-old male. I wanted to be around my friends. I wanted to have a date to prom, and I wanted to get into college. Those were my relevant goals, right? So you anchor the things that matter most, right? If your kid wants to be able to play in the April Fool's Day Minecraft tournament, well, then that's a goal that's going to drive recovery because we want to marshal our resources to make that specific thing happen. And then last but not least, a time-bound goal. So one of the interesting things about having a brain tumor is it's this whole sort of hurry up and wait world, right? You get diagnosed and then there's treatment and consultations and then there's more consultations and there's theoretical moves forward. And is there a surgery? Is there more than one surgery? It's a lot of time management, right? So if you're going to have goals, you want them to have realistic timelines, right? You probably don't want to have surgery within 24 hours of getting diagnosed unless it's a medical emergency, right? You want to take the time to make the best possible decision, right? So I want to have a decision on what to do with my brain tumor by the end of the month. That's a realistic goal, right? To go back to the losing weight example, right? If my client wants to lose another 10 pounds by this weekend because his ex-girlfriend's going to be in town, I'm like, buddy, short of chopping off an arm, you're not going to lose 20 pounds by Saturday, right? You might be able to lose 2 pounds by Saturday, but tying things to meaningful time limits allows us to be more likely to meet our goals, which then we get that positive reinforcement. So some people ask me in the face of all these giant catastrophic challenges, why have hope? Why set goals? Like when there are things that are like outside of our control, why try to have hope? Well, I love this quote from Stephen King, and it's saying, pray for rain all you like, but dig a well as you do it. Right? We are praying that our doctors and nurses and surgeons and oncologists and specialists know what they're doing, and their hands will be guided by their years of training and whatever higher power you believe in. Right? I'm going to pray for your kids for you. Right? I'm joining the prayer train. Also, I'm going to do all the things that are in my power to up my chances of success. Right? It may rain today, it may rain tomorrow, it may rain Sunday. But if I have the ability to water my plants before now and before then, I'm going to do it because that's a thing I can control. And like I said before, having your hand on the steering wheel increases agency, increases buy-in, and your kids are going to do better because they feel better. So hope helps us. Hope is a type of psychological capital. And this is where it gets really analogous to the therapy space, because the more you invest in a relationship with anybody, but it's specifically a kid, you're adding into that relationship capital. And the more capital's in the account, the more you can withdraw. So the more you invest in somebody's hope, they have better health outcomes, including recovery from brain surgery, better athletic outcomes. They tend to do better in sports. Better academic outcomes. They tend to get better grades and go to better colleges, and better occupational goals. You tend to get more, you tend to get better jobs and more promotions. So these are all good things. But if it was as simple as just snapping our fingers and giving people hope, then we wouldn't need my job, and we certainly wouldn't need this webinar. The idea here is that we invest with hope with kids by making the relationship with them matter. So when I when I work with kids in therapy, a lot of times what I do doesn't really look like traditional therapy, right? It looks like things that you're like, why would you do this? What is that all about? And the reason we do things this way is that for a lot of kids, talking about Star Wars or looking at their comic book art or talking about their fan theories about the MCU, those are the things that create that relationship hope, that allow you to make that meaningful deposit, right? Because think about it, how sick are your kids by this point are of talking about their illness, of talking about their brain tumor? They're probably exhausted, right? So these are times to talk about, like, where do you want to go on vacation this summer? When you're better, should we go to Disney? Should we go to Hawaii? Should we go to Iceland? Where do you want to go? Right? Those are the ways we create that hope. We create the relationship. And the more we do that, what happens downstream is that when we do need to ask our kids to do something that they really don't want to do, right? Because we've invested in that relationship, we know that they're much more likely to do the thing we're asking them to do. As a therapist, I can say to a kid, listen, we have talked a lot about your bottle cap collection, and I would love to talk to you about that for the rest of our hour. But I know you failed the spelling test this week, and I think we need to talk about that. I am naming the fact that I have invested in that relationship and I've made some deposits in that bank, and I'm making a small withdrawal, right? And I'm not saying that to be emotionally manipulative. I'm saying that we have done these things and I value and trust you. And part of valuing and trusting you is pivoting to the other things we need to talk about, right? So if you can invest in your kids going to their t-ball games or going to Girl Scouts or watching their lengthy YouTube videos about them playing Overwatch with their friends, all of those things invest in the relationship, which creates more of that hope psychological capital. And the cool thing there is that hope becomes cumulative. And I've asked a lot of parents over the years, why'd you pick the hospital you did? Right? Why did you pick that hospital? Like, because, to quote Jerry Seinfeld, right? Like, there aren't too many bad brain surgeons. Like, when you reach that level, it's real, you're just pretty damn good at your job. So if we assume the specialists are relatively stable across the board, why'd you pick that hospital? And inevitably, people will say it was the environment. It was the way that it felt when I was there. And that's a question of relationships, right? Do you feel good about the nurses? Do you feel good about the welcome staff? Do you like the color of the hallway? Do you like the food in the cafeteria? All these things matter, because the better we feel, the better we do. The better we do, the more engaged we become. The more engaged we become, the better we feel. And the better we feel becomes the better we do. It becomes a virtuous cycle, not a vicious one, right? And in a situation where we're recovering for something catastrophic, we're going to take every half percentage chance of improvement we can, right? So if you feel better in one place than another, that's your brain telling you something, because we want that hope to feel cumulative, because we know bad times, challenging times are coming. It's an inevitability, even if your kid doesn't have a brain tumor, right? Because high school is going to be hard, or you're going to get cut from the field hockey team, or you're going to get your heart broken at spring fling, or we know that challenges are coming. But if you're in an environment that has relationships that build hope, you have a lot more capital in the bank to navigate those moments. And this leads us into what we call the paradox of hope. So one thing that I think of, if I have a singular strength as a therapist, it's my ability to be a no bullshit person, to be authentic. And I think that kids in general crave authenticity. And kids who have been dealt a hard hand, they're not looking for people to look at them and be like, everything's going to be fine. Like, life is not a Hallmark movie, right? They want you to be authentic with them. And that doesn't mean doom and gloom. It means, I'm scared. This is hard. I trust you. I trust me. I trust our doctors. That's authentic, right? People respond to that. So the paradox of hope is that to have hope implies that your life is not the way you want it to be, right? You are essentially saying that to hope my life is better means my life is not what I want. I don't have the job, the relationship, the house, the career, the physical body, the medical health I want to have the life I want. So to be hopeful, you have to acknowledge that I don't have what I want. But the best thing about having hope is that you already don't have it. So you might as well go out and get it, because the worst thing that happens is that nothing changes. The worst thing that happens is that you go for that job and you don't get it. Well, you still have your job, right? And you were already unhappy in it. So, I remember I was growing up as a gifted kid, I was a spelling bee kid for a long time. And I was in the New Jersey State quarterfinals, and I had a word, and the word was sergeant. It's a particularly difficult word to spell. There's a sneaky E in there. And the voice to text told y'all how to spell. But imagine being 11 years old and trying to spell it, right? So you only had 45 seconds to spell the word. So it's like, okay, SARG. I was like, is there a sneaky E or not? Sergeant. So, and I'm running out of time. And I realized in that moment that I was going to lose if I didn't guess. And so that helped me see it as I had nothing to lose. So I said, all right, fine. SARGEANT, sergeant. And they're like, you got it right. I was like, woohoo. And then we moved on. So I didn't have what I wanted. I had the hope that it would work out for me. So I mentioned choosing that hospital, right? Hope benefits powerfully from community. And it's possible to be hopeful alone, but it's easier to be hopeful in a community, right? There's that old line that if you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We are social animals. We learn well for others and from others, right? So we want to be in a community that inspires and manifests that learning. One of the cool things about community is that it limits negative and self-defeating beliefs, right? If you're in a passionate, caring, informed community, you are much less likely to have a nurse that says like, oh yeah, there's just no hope. Kids don't recover from brain tumors, because we know that's not true. It's hard work and it's scary, right? You want an environment that gets that can understand what that existential crisis looks like, what a kid loses hope, right? And the power of communities that gives you multiple perspectives to allow to multiple avenues of success. And the way that this manifests in the medical space, right, is you have mental health and medical health and surgery and nursing and education. You've got all these specialists who are working with your kid who are all providing pieces of the mosaic that creates healing, right? It's not just, oh, well, let's just cut that tumor out of there, flip, bling, throw it in the garbage can. Multiple perspectives allow us to consider an avenue we didn't think of, or look for a pathway that is somebody's specialty. When I work with kids in schools, I often can give them strategies or perspectives that they don't think of because they're looking at it from an educational lens. I look at it as a mental health lens. I'm like, well, this kid is anxious about this thing. So if we manage the anxiety, they might do better in the practice. Like, oh, wow, we've just been thinking about how to teach them how to read. So there's another view that can amplify that. And my favorite example of the power of community is from soccer, actually, of all the things. So I'm a big soccer fan. And when I lived in Philadelphia, the U.S. men's national team was playing a friendly against Mexico. Mexico is our arch rivals. We follow soccer, they're El Tri. And they come to, we play a lot of games. And they were really highly ranked, and we were not. So I show up at the game and I'm decked out red, white, and blue. I've got an American flag cape. I've got an Uncle Sam hat. And I walk into the stadium, Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, if you know it. And I'm just overwhelmed by how many Mexico fans there are. I mean, they have invaded our city and they are dominating the stadium. And I felt about 2 inches tall. Right. So I'm sitting there being like, oh gosh, like there's no way we're going to win this game. I felt so isolated and alone. And then in the far left corner of the stadium, I saw a bunch of people banging drums and jumping up and down. And my seats were that way. So I was sort of walking towards them. And all of a sudden I hear what they're saying. And this guy he's yelling, I. And then the group would say it back to him, I believe. I believe that. And so, I mean, it's got my attention now. Like, this is the world's slowest sentence. What are they talking about? And then the guy comes to the crescendo and he's like, I believe that we will win. And then the entire section started jumping up and down and chanting, I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. And even though there was probably like 300 to 400 people in that section, it felt like there were 3,000 to 4,000 people. And I'll tell you, I just ditched my ticket and went and sat with them. Somebody handed me a drum at some point, and we did that chant for the entire game. And it was so funny because I went from feeling alone and hopeless to surrounded by community and empowered, just because I sat with some rowdy hooligans at a soccer game. And it was such a powerful experience that when I was putting this story in this slide deck, I actually had to look up the score of the game because I didn't remember if we won or lost. We actually tied 1-1, but all I remember was feeling the power of being surrounded by like-minded fans and having something to chant and cheer about for 90 minutes, since it's soccer, was really 90 minutes plus stoppage time. So just so you don't have to take my word for it, I've got this little video clip here, and I think even if you're not a sports fan, I think you'll like this. So I hope you guys could hear that. I think I set the audio right. Probably should have asked that earlier. But I just think that's just such a powerful message, and the way that it builds as the chant goes on is pretty awesome. All right, there we go. So we think about ways to build hope in yourself, right? And since you can't always surround yourself with thousands of rowdy soccer fans, though I would obviously highly recommend it. So we want to look back at past wins. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So even if your kid has never had a brain tumor before, have they overcome ear infections or a sprained ankle or a broken collarbone, right? Past wins are a thing to look on and say, yeah, I have overcome challenges before. That's a good reminder. The second thing is to celebrate yourself in your current wins. This is what we call in psychology the yes test. And look at that. That went away. Come back here, you. So the idea behind the yes test is our brains tend not to give us a lot of credit for the things we do that feel basic or routine. But every positive thing we do matters, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But one of the things we can do is give ourselves low-hanging fruit by ramping up the power and impact of all the positive things that we're already doing. So if you're somebody who ate breakfast today, you probably didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But do me a favor, jump in the chat if you ate breakfast today. I did. I had a cereal bar. Yes. Look at all those yeses, right? Love it. Got some healthy people here. That's very good. Right. And if you probably didn't give yourselves a lot. I had a great breakfast this morning. Stuart, I love it. Love the energy there. Right. So it's easy to say like, oh yeah, I just had breakfast. Right. But breakfast isn't the healthiest meal of the day. It's an important thing to do. So if you ate breakfast today, put in the chat a big yes. Because did you eat breakfast today? Yes. Right. Chest voice, theater kid. Right. So pop that in the chat. Give yourself a yes for the good things you do. Right. Have you had a glass of water today? Yes. Have you reached out to a friend? Yes. And if you haven't done those things, then the yes test is a good reminder to do those things and add in that value. Be creative. What haven't we tried? When we get stressed out, we can get very close-minded and black and white in our thinking. Well, we have to do this. We have to do this. This is the way to do it. We have to do this. Why? Right? I had a client a couple of years ago who was working on some pretty sizable anger issues. And he came to session one day. He's like, I got to do yoga. Tell me how to do yoga. I'm like, do you want to do yoga? He's like, no, yoga sucks. I hate yoga. But everyone tells me I got to do yoga. Yoga is how I'm going to be calm. I'm like, dude, if you don't want to do yoga, check this out. 5 years of grad school for this. Maybe don't do yoga. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, man. Because if it doesn't work for you, let's try something else. What haven't you tried? Because he was going to yoga and he hated it. Well, he's like, well, what I really want to do is do like Tai Chi, like they did in the Karate Kid. So I found him a Tai Chi coach. And he did much better with Tai Chi than he ever would have done trying to do downward dog in some gym. Reflect, pray, meditate, whatever the ways are for you to center yourself and your brain and your body. Filter your inputs. No doom scrolling, my friends. It's very easy to doom scroll, right? But what I would tell you to do is, my rule of thumb is always, I can only spend as many minutes on the site as there are letters in the name, right? So if I doom scroll about politics, well, there's only 3 letters in CNN. So I'm like, okay, I can only spend 3 minutes on this website. Facebook, 8 minutes. Instagram, 8 minutes. I'm sorry, 9 minutes for Instagram. But those you don't have to follow it exactly, but it just puts a little cap on that input. And then instill hope in others, right? If we can't do it for ourselves, if we give hope to others, we get the cumulative effect, we get the splashback of that. To give hope to others, we create an atmosphere of hope. We set clear goals that are concrete and realistic, like we talked about before. We align those goals with our values, right? What matters most to us is going to set more meaningful goals that we're going to commit to. We cultivate that growth mindset. We're always learning, and you can fail and still move forward, right? I always say that FAIL is an acronym for frequent attempts in learning, right? So if you try a medical procedure and it doesn't work, well, it sucks that it didn't work. We also learned that this thing doesn't work for us. Okay, now we know another thing. When they sent me home from the hospital, they sent me home on a particular anti-inflammatory that they think a lot of kids do well on. I had a sizably terrible negative reaction to it, to the point where we had to rush back to the hospital. Now, granted, I would have much preferred to not be vomiting and feel like my brain was exploding, but you better believe they didn't ever give me that medicine again. That's a growth mindset. And then we take the perspective, we check in with ourselves and remind ourselves of not only how we're doing, but how far we've come. And one of the other ways that organizations can build hope is through how the environment can blow the pinwheel of hope from any direction, right? Are we making adaptations to what this person needs? Are we giving them time for self-reflection? If you're shoveling a kid off to 93 appointments and specialists in a day, they don't have time to sit and think. Are we letting them have moments of clarity? Are we having honest and authentic conversations? Can we help them vision what their wife wants to look like? And are we using those SMART goals to set meaning goals? And then are we implementing them? I think this last one, implementation, is one of the hardest things to do, because it's easy to talk about it. It's not easy to establish the time, structure, and resources necessary to make that happen. So if you're think about your environment. At home, are we doing this? At school, are we doing this? In the hospital, are we doing this? Because the environment absolutely creates feelings of hope and amplifies feelings of hope. Here are 6 concrete ways we can do that. So one way to talk about the cumulative aspect of hope is what I like to call the ice cream sundae test. So if, let's see, do you think, now I know that this is a panelist version, so will have to do this via chat. Let's see. So Josie Jones, would you mind jumping in the chat and helping me out with something? Awesome. Thank you. Josie, do you like ice cream? Perfect. I did this once and the person was like, I'm actually lactose intolerant. I'm like, did not choose the right person. So, all right. So Josie, you're going to help me build an ice cream sundae, right? So what we're going to do here is we are going to build your ice cream sundae from the bottom up. So Josie, would you like a round, shallow bowl, a tall, thin glass, or a classic ice cream dish? Classic dish, right? That's what most people choose. It's like a nostalgia thing. All right, I'm going to give you three kinds of ice cream in your sundae. Give me three kinds of ice cream, Josie. Chocolate strawberry. Ooh, and salted caramel. I love it. Very good choice. Very good. I appreciate that. So we have a classic ice cream dish with chocolate strawberry and salted caramel. Now, Josie, we're going to go rapid fire through toppings. Okay. Do you want chocolate sauce? No chocolate sauce on the sundae. I love it. Remember, personal values. It only has to work for Josie. Personally, I would want the chocolate sauce. She doesn't. Do you want crushed nuts? We got crushed nuts on there. How about sprinkles? No sprinkles. How about gummy bears? No, like just like that. How about sliced banana? So we're going banana, and we've got some crushed nuts. Feeling like very like a healthy vibe here, right? How about hot fudge? Caramel sauce. My mouth is literally watering. Josie, is your mouth watering right now? Yeah, right. Love it. I think everybody else in the chat's like, oh, I want ice cream too. All right, now Josie, I'm gonna put some whipped cream on top of your sundae. Are you okay with that? No whipped cream. All right, so we're not gonna do whipped cream. And then I'm gonna top your sundae with a cherry. So no cherry. Well, it's stick with me on this because we can use that in a different way. So we've got a classic ice cream dish with chocolate, strawberry, and salted caramel ice cream. We've got bananas, we've got crushed nuts, we've got hot fudge, we've got caramel sauce. We have no sprinkles or whipped cream or cherry. And so I take Josie's order and I put all the things there, but I misread her last words and I put a cherry on top of the sundae. So Josie, I've given you the sundae with everything you want but the cherry, but there's a cherry on there. I hand that sundae to you. What do you do with the sundae? Take it and remove the cherry. Round of applause for Josie. That's exactly it, right? Because you have 97% of what you want. You just have this one thing that isn't what you want. So we take the cherry, we put it in the garbage, and that's it. It's done. And now you have a sundae that you designed from the ground up. Now, here's what makes this powerful for what we're talking about today. When the ice cream sundae test is a great example of what we call bottom-up thinking. The idea is that the default is nothing. The default is we get no ice cream. But every decision we make about ice cream gets us closer to getting the ice cream we want. And if there's a mistake that occurs or we can't get you something you want, you have added a bunch of percentage points. You've walked up the ladder several steps to get towards the optimal goal, right? So in this case, we got 97% of what Josie wanted, and it sounds like a delicious ice cream sundae. What most people do, the kind of thinking most people do, is inverted of that. It's top down thinking. So in this case, Josie sees the ice cream sundae that she ordered, but there's a cherry on top. So she takes the ice cream and she throws it in the garbage because it wasn't perfect. And we unfortunately end up thinking that way when we're stressed out and scared and overwhelmed, which, by the way, if we're navigating the things we're navigating, it makes sense we'd be feeling that way, right? So what we want to do is we want to use the ice cream sundae test to model bottom-up thinking, which is cumulative and aspirational and much more human than top-down thinking, which is results-oriented and tends to be negative, right? I always ask the kids I work with, if you get a 93 on a test, is that a good grade? And a lot of the kids, because I work with a lot of gifted kids, they're like, no, it's a terrible grade. It's like, listen, you can think of that as I knew 93% of the material, or I got 7 points wrong. Which one do you think is a mentally healthier way to think? And that usually works out pretty well. So thank you, Josie, for designing your perfect ice cream sundae. So the idea, the idea here is the plan. It's easy to default into. We hope it all works out, right? And I'll tell you this: hope, for all of its wonderful things, hope is not a good plan. And to take an extra moment to highlight that thing, how many of us have ever said, it's going to be okay to somebody, right? And I think if we would all raise our hands on that one, right? Feel free to raise your hands or throw a yes in the chat. And it's really one of those things. It's so easy to say that, but we don't actually really know. That's that authenticity, right? We don't know if the surgery will go well. We don't know if the treatment will stick. We sure as hell hope so, right? But we don't know. We also run the risk of invalidating our kids' feelings. Like if they're like, I'm scared, and you say it's going to be okay, we're skipping right over the part where your kid is telling you they're scared. So two things can be true at the same time, that we think it's going to be okay, and your kid has right to be scared. And lastly, what a lot of parents tell me is they say things are going to be okay for their comfort, not their kids' comfort. And that's a very human thing, right? We're all humans. We love our kids. We want them to not be in stress. But sometimes it's not about us. Sometimes it's about holding space for what the people in front of us feel. And I have this little chart here because one of the things we know, and people who research this have shown this time and time again, is that we have great days and we have average days and we have miserable days. All of those things are distributed across our lives. But largely speaking, the trend line of our lives is upward. And so if you've had a couple of really lousy days in a row, there is a regression to the mean coming, right? You have a couple of bad doctor's appointments. Well, we know that some good doctor's appointments are out there too. And we keep taking bites at the apple until we get one we want. And if we're not careful with the it's going to be okay, it can easily slide into that toxic positivity piece. Toxic positivity is the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations. These are the teachers who have or people in lives who have shirts that say good vibes only. Like, guys, life is not about good vibes. You don't have to put a happy face on when your kid is diagnosed with a brain tumor. That's ridiculous, right? The process of toxic positivity can deny or minimize or even invalidate authentic human emotional experiences that range the gamut from very, very happy to very, very angry or very, very scared or totally shut down. All vibes are welcome here. They're not all equally pleasant, but they're all welcome. By disallowing the existence of certain feelings, we can fall into a state of denial and repressed emotions. One of the hardest things when you've got a kid who's really sick is making space for them to be angry and anxious and scared and overwhelmed, and then anxious again, and then angry again. Because all of those feelings have a space in the recovery process. If we're like, put on a happy face, good vibes only, they're spending some of that precious energy on pushing those emotions down when we could be using that energy on trying to get better. So some signs of toxic positivity that we should look out for here: hiding or masking your true feelings, trying to just get on with it by stuffing your emotions away, feeling guilty for feeling what you feel. And that's the thing. Your kids might say like, well, mom and dad, it's hard enough on you. I shouldn't be sad or scared. Listen, you're the star of this show. Be sad, angry, scared, anxious, hungry, whatever it is. You minimize other people's experiences with feel-good quotes or statements. If I have one more well-meaning adult say to a kid with a brain tumor, it's all part of God's plan, I will throw a rock at them, because maybe also that's not helpful. Trying to give somebody perspective, like it could be worse. In recovery from anything, we don't play the misery Olympics, right? Yes, somebody always has it worse, but what's also true is that somebody always has it better. There are 8 billion people on this planet. So regardless of how good or bad your day is, there are literally billions of people who are having better days and literally billions of people who are having worse days. That's why we don't play the misery Olympics, right? You'll lose every time. And that's what I tell people. There is no low barrier to entry to do therapy. I don't care if you just got catastrophically dumped in front of the whole world, lost your job, and your car fell into a ditch. Those are good reasons to come to therapy. It is equally relevant to come to therapy if you're like, I just don't like how my life is going. That's a great reason to go to therapy. We don't want to shame or chastise others for expressing frustration or anything other than positivity. This is why I love nurses. Nurses are very much like, we got to deal with it. It is what it is. Let's move forward, right? I don't know any nurses that are toxically positive, because I don't think you can be a nurse and have that mindset. And brushing off things that are bothering you with that classic, it is what it is. You are allowed to say it is what it is because it's a place of acceptance, as long as that acceptance is in the place of, now that I've accepted this is my reality, where do you go from here? So when I was diagnosed, it was a Wednesday evening, November 14th, 2001. And my family doctor came over with the fMRI scans and that showed my tumor. And he showed them to me, and my mom is crying and my dad is crying. And I looked at him and I looked at the scans and I looked at him and I said, okay, this sucks. What do I do? And, he's still a good family friend. And he said, that's when I knew you were going to be okay. Because you didn't say like, this is going to be fine. It's great. It's a blessing. And you didn't crumble and rend at your garments and trying to pretend it wasn't happening. You looked at it, you said, okay, this sucks, which is true. It is an objectively true thing that it sucks to have a brain tumor. And now what do we do? So that's how we move away from toxic positivity. So one of my favorite studies in all of mental health is the impact of toxic positivity on not only doctor-patient relationships, but long-term health outcomes. So one of the things that we know to be true is that people who really like their doctors die sooner. And that may seem like a weird thing to say, because I was talking so much about the power of relationships before, right? But remember, authenticity matters. If your doctor is sitting there going like, everything's fine, like, I'm not going to tell him he has a brain tumor because that would ruin his day, then you're sitting there with a brain tumor that's going untreated. Doctors who tell patients hard truths and are upfront with them and honest with them, they tend to be liked less, but respected more. And most importantly, they have patients who live longer. My surgeon, Dr. Mark Sudane, I have no idea if he's a nice person or not. I don't remember liking him very much or not liking him very much, but I remember thinking, this is a very capable person. This is a person who knows what they're doing, right? And there were some doctors we met who were like, oh my gosh, like, this is what surgeon looks like. And here's Jimmy the scalpel, and he's going to walk you through the brain surgery. I'm like, don't treat me like a kid, right? Like, tell me what the real stakes of this are, right? So, it's one of those things that if you have a doctor or a surgeon who's a real ball buster, that might be helpful for you in the long run. And you might want to round out with the team with people who can give you other perspectives that are more positive. And, that's I think the reason we're all here, right? It's just the go gray in May, because when I Googled this, it's like, oh, right. Hope is literally on the t-shirts, right? Because the power of hope is that we would want a day where none of us need to have these jobs, that none of us need to go to these meetings, right? That brain tumors are no longer a thing. But until that day happens, I'm going to show up every day for my clients in my community, because that's what the gig entails. That's what we have now. None of us signed up for this, but it's what we're faced with, right? So we're going to go gray in May until we don't have to go gray in May ever again. So one book that I found really helpful in my own mental health journey is Everything is Effed by Mark Manson. And it's a spectacular book. And the audiobook is also really good. But for the parents out there, I found it so inspiring because he was so honest. And there are a lot of great quotes, but I wanted to highlight this one. Everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. Any attempt to escape the negative, to avoid it or quash it or silence it, only backfires. Real hope only comes from owning the pain it took to overcome it. That, my friends, is a very powerful mindset to bring in to this brain tumor journey. So if we're going back to the therapy thing, we're going to feel our feelings and be authentic, right? The paradox, as Carl Jung said, the paradox is that as soon as I accept myself as I am, I can begin to change, right? We have to own it. Challenges are not about personal worth, even if you cause the problem. Now, this doesn't always apply to the brain tumor situation, but kids will try to center the narrative in themselves. They'll try and say things like, this is my fault somehow. Did I play under power lines, or did I eat lead paint, or did I, do Bloody Mary 7 times in the mirror so I got a brain tumor? Like, even if any of those things were true, and it's not likely that they were, the challenges you face have nothing to do with your value as a human being. It is simply the challenge you are faced with. And we focus on what the miracle question tells us. What are we on our ideal world to look like? What does recovery look like? And we're going to use that to set meaningful goals. And we're going to focus on things kids can control. Because in this situation, they're under the best of circumstances, there are going to be a lot of variables that are out of their control. And that's okay. That's a reality of the situation. You can't control the surgeons available to you in your community. You can't control what your insurance is going to pay for. You can control how you take care of your brain and your body and how you approach recovery. So you can't talk about hope without the underside of hope, right? And the risk factors that we have here for less ideal outcomes include existential depression. If you have a kid who is more aligned to depression, kids who have a ruminative cognitive style, they will turn the brain tumor thing over and over and over and over. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? We need to break those loops. Poor fits in environments. That could be the wrong hospital or the wrong medical provider. It could be the wrong school that isn't working with you to support their educational needs while they're having brain surgery. Previous traumas or ruptures. If you have a kid who doesn't trust doctors or nurses for whatever reason, treatment's going to be harder. So we need to spend the time finding the trust back in those programs again. Kids who are more emotionally intense, kids who have bigger feelings, that's a lot of the neurodivergent community, tend to have bigger feelings, and lack of understanding of the self and understanding the treatment. You may not be able to explain what's happening to a kid at medical school level terms, but every person deserves to know what's happening to them and why. That's just good practice, especially with kids. So if you're checking a couple of boxes on this risk factor list, you may want to change up how you're treating this. Because if we don't deal with the risk factors, we're going to have kids who develop despair. And despair is one of the more troubling mental health emotions that can lead to a lot of bad mental health conditions, including depression and including suicide. The 3 things we look for when we're talking about despair are the feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness. When you don't have hope, it's hard to have a future. When you feel helpless, you don't see any efficacy or agency you have to make your life better. And when you blame yourself, you think you're worthless. This is my fault. I suck. I'm not worthy of getting better. There's a famous story about Sharon Osbourne when she had cancer, that Robin Williams would show up in her hospital room every day and spend time with her and make her laugh for the purposes of reminding her that she was worthy of the time and effort and money it would take to get over cancer. Right. And sometimes we need to remind our kids and ourselves that we are worthy of feeling better and doing better and having lives we want. So if your kid comes to you with feelings that are disruptive or scary, things like anger, anxiety, fear, irritation, it's easy to be mad at them for getting upset. That's a very human response. What we want to do is be curious, not furious. We don't argue with their feelings or condemn them. Like, how dare you be upset that you have a brain tumor? Like, well, of course they're upset they have a brain tumor. Tell me more. Tell me more. Help me understand those feelings. If we understand how someone thinks, then their choices make more sense. Your kid who's expressing suicidal ideation or no hope for the future may not really believe they're going to recover from this. They may not feel like they're going to get better. They're like, I have a glioblastoma. The recovery rates for these are really low. What's the point of planning for senior year if I'm not going to make it through the summer? And if you understand that, you don't have to like it. But if you understand where they're coming from, then the other things are now seen through that context and will make more sense. And vitally, no one chooses to be despairing or feel despair. So what happened? Is there a shift? Did they read an article on TikTok? Did they have a bad meeting with the doctor? Once again, if we're curious about context, we can understand. When our kids are struggling, we take these 5 core steps: ask questions and then listen. Right? As God, as my grandmother always said, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Right? We're there with them. We create connectedness. Sometimes the best treatment you can have with a kid is playing Uno or drawing pictures or playing Minecraft or Super Smash Brothers. Connectedness is treatment in a way that medicine and surgery are also treatment, but are very different. Keep them safe. Who can help you? How can you get them to a safe place or keep them away from an unsafe place? And help them connect to not only to people within the community and without the community and resources, right? Obviously, the good people at Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation are putting on this webinar today, right? They're amazing resources. I can't pretend that I don't love them very much, but there's a lot of resources and communities out there. No one should do this alone, right? So we're going to feel more hope when we're surrounded by an environment, a community that provides hope. So we need to help them connect. And we follow up. It is a very common thing as a parent or a professional to have a kid get through a meltdown and then pretend it never happened. Like, well, you were really upset yesterday, but I don't want you to be upset again. So let's just not talk about it. Like, hey, you were really down yesterday. How are you feeling today? Right? Curious, not furious. In these moments, we try to be the lighthouse. Now, I grew up on the Jersey Shore, right? So to me, when kids are in trouble in the water, I see this from every parent. They try and leap into the water to save their kid. In those moments, it is much better to find a lifeguard because the lifeguards bring a tool, right? Lifeguards bring a floaty or a surfboard, something to help that process. And I would even extend that metaphor further out, is try to be the lighthouse, try to be a beacon, something stable and secure that your kids can always look to. And you might be dying on the inside and you can bring that authenticity in. Like, yeah, I'm scared too, right? But the thing about the lighthouse is the lighthouse keeps the light on so the boats know where to go. And if the lighthouse sees that the boat is in trouble, they call the Coast Guard. They don't abandon the lighthouse and get in the boat themselves, right? You're allowed to stay steady and consistent and call in reinforcements because that's how we help our kids co-regulate. So one great example of this is from the movie Inside Out. And when Bing Bong loses his sled over the edge into the land of forget, Joy is like, come on, we gotta go, we gotta save Riley. Come on. It's gonna be okay. She's super happy. She's doing that sort of toxic positivity thing. And Bing Bong can't move. It isn't until Sadness sits down with Bing Bong and talks about his feelings and how he feels about losing his sled that he's able to get up and move forward. So like Carl Jung said, as soon as I'm able to accept myself as I am, I can change. By accepting that he was sad, he was able to refocus on the goal of helping Joy help Riley, right? So you may need to sit with your kid in sadness for a long time for them to recommit to treatment. But if that's what it takes, then that's where we have to sit. So I'm going to wrap us up with a quote from one of my favorite musicals. And it's a nice thing to sort of end this up on. And it's worth listening to this song. It's called Living It Up on Top, if you haven't heard it. But the quote reads, "To the patroness of all of this, Persephone. And if no one takes too much, there will always be enough. She will always fill our cups, and we will always raise them up." And then Orpheus does a toast to the audience. And if you are so willing, you can do this toast with me. So I will toast with my smoothie. to the world we dream about and the one we live in now. I've never found a better distillation of the concept of hope than this quote. We are all toasting to the world we dream about, where our kids are healthy and whole, and we don't ever have to talk about brain tumors ever again. And we're going to toast to the world we live in now, because that's how we're going to focus on getting better and getting to that life we want. So here's how to track me down if you have any additional questions. You guys were a tremendous audience. Thank you for joining us with this. We've got some time for questions, which I'm happy to take. But before we do anything else, please give yourselves a huge round of applause. You guys were terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matt. As usual, I come away with notes and quotes and ideas, and I think the thing I'm going to try to do today is not doom scroll.
Yeah.
And use the minutes for my Facebook. 8 minutes.
8 minutes.
8 minutes. If anyone has any questions like Dr. Matt shared, please put those down in the Q&A. There is one question that came in at registration that I do want to put out here to you before we wrap today, because I think this is something that comes up so frequently with our families. Taking care of an extremely ill child can be intense. How do you stay hopeful in the midst of anticipatory grief?
Grief is an emotion, and emotions cannot be reasoned with. They are forces of nature, right? So think of grief, especially anticipatory grief, like the word we always use, it's data, not a direction, right? Because I'm feeling grief, it's because I have something to grieve about. But it doesn't mean that that pathway is set in stone, right? Foundational to any mental health treatment is the idea of moving from what if to what is. Anticipatory grief is, what if my kid dies? What if our lives are ruined? What if they never get better? And if any of those things happen, it will suck. It will be awful. But none of those things have happened yet. So let us do what we can to deal with the things in front of us. What is true is that my kid has been diagnosed with a major illness. What is true is I have to make a lot of hard decisions. What might be true in the future, I have to trust myself that I'll handle it when it comes up.
Thank you for that. I do not see any more questions. Thank you to those of you who attended today, and we will send out the slides from Dr. Matt, as well as our contact information, and we hope to see you all again next month. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.